Hello and welcome to the delicious recipe here on UPRN. I think we're on 107.7 FM, New Orleans Talk Radio. You can check us out live on YouTube, and we are on UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials, and you can check us out there and on UFO Paranormal. You can check us out on my own Facebook page, Del Lessie, The Delicious Recipe, and you can watch live there as well. And let me go here and click on this and make sure this is running. And I got here one of my former bosses there, Big Jim Paris. And you know what? He's been around the block. He's a prospector, a geologist, a musician, author, and you know what? He's met so many people there, and there's so many stories that he has. We've been talking for the last about 30 minutes, 40 minutes of stories and things. And you know what? I wish they all could be added into the show. And you know what? I'll just let Big Jim there introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm the epitome of a Canadian prospector. We're a dying breed. We're pretty well obsolete now. Uh, Everything's done with electronics and GPSs and all the modern day. The maps are all digital now. So the 5,000 maps that I've got in my filing cabinets that are all laminated and maps from all over Canada and United States, some from Africa. Well, my son told me, I told my son, I said, I hope when I die that you're gonna, keep some of my maps around. He said, "Oh yeah, no problem." And I said, "Well, that's good to hear." He said, "Until you die, that is." The day after, he said, "Well, the landfill." So I said, "The landfill? Oh my God." Anyways, yeah, I've had.
He's a cop, isn't he?
Yeah, he was on the containment unit, and he did his time. After a certain amount of time, they have to retire to let the new blood in. It's such a stressful business, breaking into, kicking in doors and going into houses, and you're always dealing with people with loaded handguns. You never know what they're going to do, so pretty stressful for sure, and all the stuff that you see over the years. But he's had a very interesting career and still with the force here in Thunder Bay.
And now he's a llama farmer too, because we do
Uh,
a concert together, right?
alpacas.
Yeah,
Well, they're similar to
yeah,
llamas, but
alpacas. Yes, the alpaca fest, and that's. I just wanted to get into the whole part about talking about music there because you've had a heavy music career growing up.
yeah, well, I've been fortunate. Just last week, I was talking to my old buddy Ronnie Hawkins there from Toronto. Ronnie came up from Arkansas and he saw the Golden Goose right on Yonge Street there, and he opened a club called the Cock Door. A lot of old timers would probably remember that. And Ronnie's had an amazing career. Ronnie the Hawk Hawkins, and he had a band called the Hawks, and a bunch of the Hawks went on to be the band. Robbie
Hmm.
Robertson and Levon Helm and the rest of the guys that were formed the band, and of course they got a lot of early publicity backing up Bob Dylan when he went electric. And I played
Hmm.
in a couple of bands, the Voodoos, the Fallen Leaves. We recorded in Toronto. And then I got into booking bands. So I used to bring bands up from Toronto to Timmins, where my headquarters were. I was lucky I landed in Timmins right when the Texas Gulf Rush was on, was 1963, 64. And Timmins was just loaded with money at the time. Everybody that wanted to work was working. There was all sorts of money. The bars were full all the time. The promoters were pouring in from Toronto and from Vancouver. Murray Pesum, who went on to be involved in the Hemlo discovery, he was working with a fellow by the name of Earl Glick, and they used to come into the Empire Hotel, and he, Earl Glick had Murray Pesden carrying all these roses, and they would go around, and Earl would hand out roses to the ladies, and he would say, "Oh, and by the way, we just acquired this mining property right next to Texas Gulf, and you might want to look at the stock. It's trading, 10 cents or whatever." And then he would get Murray to light $100 bill on fire and light Earl Glick's cigar. Well, Murray went his way and went on to be the famous mining promoter out of Vancouver. And Earl Glick and his brother packed up in Toronto and they moved to California. And they ended up being these phenomenally successful movie producers. So, I mean, you just never know where life is going to take you.
Yeah, there's so many things like we were talking about earlier there, and just amazing stories of just where your life went from, because you were up in Timmins, Kirkland Lake, Flin Flon, Manitoba, and then doing deals in Toronto, and then dealing with the people that were around there in the music and in geology, prospecting. Like there's so many ways we can go. Like there's so many stories that you have that are just so amazing.
Well, I was born in South Porcupine, which is now part of Timmins, and of course, Shania Twain's stepfather, he worked for us in the bush, and then unfortunately, he and his wife got killed, and Shania pretty well had to raise the kids after that. So I give her a lot of, I think her name at the time was Eileen Twain, and there was some people out of Kirkland Lake, the Kasner husband and wife team. Her stage name was Mary Bailey, and Bob had some successful mining companies, and they signed her to a contract and took her down to Nashville and recorded her with Bo Derrick's husband there, John Derrick, and her first album didn't do that well. But when she ran into Mutt Lang, Mutt could see the possibility of the two of them teaming up. I mean, they hit it right off the bat, and they were good
Hmm.
songwriters. Of course, Mutt already had his credits producing bands like Def Leppard, and he told Shania, he said, you got to break your contract with the Kasners, even though I know that you're pretty tight with them because they started your career off. So she broke the contract. And last time I talked to Bob at a Christmas party in Toronto, I asked him, I said, how much money did you have put into Shania's career? He said, about $500,000. And he said, we had to sue her because she broke the contract. And I said, well, what'd you get out of it? And he said, well, more than $500,000. He said, but I mean, unfortunately, they probably didn't cash in because Shania and Mutt went on to have this huge career together. And of
Hmm.
course, then the rest is
Yeah.
history. They parted company, and she took up with the cleaning lady's husband, and Mutt took up with the cleaning lady. And what a story! I mean, I was up in Pickle Lake, back about 7, 8 years ago, and we were playing some music at a guy's place one night. The head mechanic for North Star Air, his brother and his brother's wife owned the North Star Air business, and the phone rang, and the daughter. Uh, uh, I'm trying to think of his name now, but he was married to Shania's sister, and the daughter went over and answered the phone. And the first thing she said was, "Oh, hi, Shania. How are you doing?" I'm like, "Come on. We're in Pickle Lake playing music here at night, drinking a few beers." And she says, "Hey, Shania." And so Shania was down in Bermuda or the Barbados or somewhere, and she wanted his daughter to come back and 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 be the babysitter for the Asia, the Shania's son. And her father said, "No, I just paid tuition for you to go to college. You're not going back to work for Shania." I never did hear what happened if she went back with Shania but it was really wild being in Pickle Lake and she answers the phone. "Oh, hi, Shania. Where are you tonight?" It blew me. I said, "Give me the phone. I want to talk to her. I want to tell her a story about her dad and her mother."
Yeah, that's funny. It's and plus also you got a lot of connections there. What when you were starting out with your bands with early BTO Guess Who stuff there too as well, right?
Well, I did when I went to school in spent 1 year at Brandon College and then another year at the U of M in Winnipeg. And when I was in Winnipeg, Randy Bachman and the Guess Who, well, actually they were called Chad Allen and the Expressions in those days before the Guess Who, and they used to play at the steakhouse. And the cool thing about that steakhouse was when you went down there, they gave you an 80-ounce steak, bowl of soup, a bun, and a salad. And now an 80-ounce steak, believe me, it's a pretty big chunk of meat hangs over the edge of the plate. But if you could eat all of that, the potato, the soup, the salad, and the steak, it was on the house. And so my buddy and I went down one time and we tried it. We paid our money and bought the meal, and we got about halfway through the food and we had to give up. But Randy and Chad Allen and the band were playing there, and that's when I met Jimmy Cale, and we went out to a few parties together. And then later on, when Burton Cummings broke into the band and Chad Allen eventually left the band, then I got to be, I mean, I had parties with them in that. I don't even know if they'd remember me today, but I got a lot of Burton stories and a lot of Jimmy Cale stories. I got a lot of Randy Bachman stories too. And Randy is such an awesome, awesome guitar player. And that band put Canada on the map. And then, of course, Randy went on to BTO. And I love the show that he does there, that Spinal Tap. And I love the live shows he does where he explains, I think he does it on Spinal Tap too, where they got the hook line for some of these songs, like, what were some of BTO's big songs? I'm trying to think of them.
Undone.
Well, that was
Please
a Guess
come
Who song. That
undone.
was a Guess Who song.
Oh,
Let It
okay,
Ride.
BTO.
Let It Ride.
Oh, Let It Ride. Oh
They're
yeah.
going down the
Actually,
highway.
that's the funny thing is because remember when me and you left Flin, Flon, Manitoba, driving back, I bought a BTO greatest hits thing, and a Foo Fighters tape, and this is when cassette tapes. There, people, when cassette tapes were the only things you could have, and I played and I put it in there, and all of a sudden that was the only one you liked was the one that it was the BTO one there with was the cassette that I was playing because you didn't like the Foo Fighters one there too much. Hey, guess what there, Big Jim?
Yeah.
Look at this. Dave
What?
Lessie is watching.
Oh, cool. Hey, Dave, how are you doing, man? Can he hear me?
Yeah, he'll hear you on the
He
screen.
probably hear me, but can't talk to me. But yeah, Dave, he's a success story, I'll tell you. And he and all the Lessie. Well, Brent's nickname used to be Brent Lessie because of Dal, Dave, and what's your other brother's name?
Daniel,
Daniel.
Daniel, yeah,
Brent was
the
always
other
Lessie.
one.
But when getting back to Let It Ride, Randy was telling us at this concert that like it was just a stage door concert, that they were
Mhm.
traveling in the United States and these semis surrounded them, one in front, one on each side, and one behind them. And they went down the highway for 20 miles like that. And of course, the band's in there with all their equipment and they're so claustrophobic because, they're almost crapping their pants because these guys aren't moving and they can't get out. And so after a while, you wonder what they're going to do to you. Finally, one semi peeled off, and so Randy drove in behind him, and he jumped out of the truck, and the trucker got out of his truck, and Randy ran up to him, and he was going to chew him out pretty good, and before he could say anything, the trucker said, "I'll tell you what, son." He says, "My advice is to just let it ride." And Randy looked at him and he said, "Hey, man, I like that. That's going to be a song one of these days." So a lot of the BTO songs, like American Woman,
Yeah,
well, that's the Guess Who song again. But
yeah,
again, that just came out of they were jamming on stage. Burton was
yeah.
outside having a smoke or a drink or something, and Randy was playing this beat. And when he came
Hmm.
back in, he just jumped in there, "American Woman, stay away from me," and they put the
Yep.
song together and recorded. And man, that was a huge hit. So there again, you
It
never
was,
know.
and that song's been redone even by Lenny Kravitz there too. American Woman there in a big, and it was a huge hit again with Lenny Kravitz doing it.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's got a
like
great
it.
beat. So you got a good beat. I got a new
Mhm,
one called Prison Ain't No Fun, Son. And
mhm.
it's got some pretty dicey lyrics, but it's got a good beat and it's fairly simple to play. And I'd like to get it out on YouTube or somewhere. I think it's going to be a big hit because I've written over 300 songs in my career, my musical career, which is not to, like my mining career, my musical career. I've had a bunch of different careers and been pretty happy about them.
Well, that's the thing there. This is a topic I've brought up many times, and because I've jumped through. I was a chef, iron worker. Now I'm working in a grocery store, and taking my apprenticeship to be a butcher now. And
No,
I'm a radio podcast host.
yeah. Well, hopefully someday there'll be some money in that for you.
Right. It says it, I don't care about that part about money in this part there with the radio stuff. There is like the whole thing with the delicious recipe is just to go and talk to people and meet people and bring out stories and get people a little bit more aware of there's other things going on in the world besides in their little small little bubble that they're collected in. And that's the whole thing is that you've had such an extensive career, and so have I too, but you've had a little bit more, you've met a little bit more entertainment people than I have.
Well, when
And
I
plus also you've written a book, and I don't want to go and miss this part there before, like you've written a book
two
or a
books,
couple,
two
two
books,
books. Yeah.
two books.
Yes. Yeah. So explain those two books then.
Well, the first one I wrote about with a fella up in Snow Lake there in Manitoba, where the big new Lawler mine is for Hudbay Minerals. I mean, that was a ghost town, and now they found the Lawler mine, and they're pouring gold bars and zinc ingots, the whole works. Mark Jackson, a great friend of mine, and we worked together on the first book, which was about my grandfather's gold mine. My
Hmm.
grandfather was almost 40 when he enlisted in World War One. He was 2 months
And
shy of being.
I met your grandfather up in Flin, Manitoba. Yeah.
Maybe you might have met my father, but I don't think you met my
Oh
grandfather.
no. Oh no, your father. Oh, sorry, your
Yeah,
father. Sorry.
and
Okay.
my grandfather was badly wounded in World War One. On September the 29th, 1918, about 3 months before the World War One ended, he got hit by a shrapnel blast and 28 pieces of metal. He had his service mirror, shaving mirror in his tunic pocket here, and the one piece of metal that hit him right in the mirror was stainless steel mirror. You can't flex that thing an iota. It put a huge gouge dent and then went off and ripped his rib cage open. And they did. I think there was 188 stitches in his rib cage. And then
Oh
he got hit
wow.
in other parts of the body. He lost half of his hand. He had to recuperate in London and then back in Canada. And so when he came, when he got back out of the hospital, he walked with a bad limp. He'd go into some place and he'd look for a job, and they'd look at him and they'd say, "We'll never get 12 hours of shoveling out of this old guy." I mean, he was already
Right. Yeah.
40 when he went to war. The other guys in his unit were all 18. Probably some of them were younger than that, 20, 22.
Mhm.
They all called them pops. So he heard about these two brothers, the Bonter brothers, that were going to go to Snow Lake and look for gold. So he said, "Well, as soon as I get organized here," he had a job at the liquor store at the time, which was pretty ironic because when his mother was dying, she was around 28 or 30 years old. Because his father was such a character, came from Denmark. They used to fight with these big chains out in Carmen, Manitoba, and drinking and whatever. And she made my grandfather, Chris Paris, swear an oath on her deathbed, that he would never drink or smoke. And he never did. And when he came back from the war, of course, he had PTSD pretty bad. And, but he had no fear. He would be in a restaurant and somebody would be smoking at the next table, and that smoke was bothering them while they're eating their food. He would go over there and he would snatch the cigarette right out of that person's mouth and said, this weed is the worst thing, it'll kill you, whatever. And people that were bigger than him, smaller than him, he didn't care. And so, anyways, when he heard about these Bonner brothers, he said, you know what? When I was recuperating in London, I had this Australian fellow that was taking me to the Royal Museum all the time and showing me all the different rocks they had in there, the rock types and the minerals. And he said I was really fascinated about the gold. And so he said, once I get a chance and get an outfit together, I'll meet you. And they went up to Snow Lake ahead of him. And then he got in a canoe and he paddled 400 miles from Snow Lake all the way with 27 portages. And he made it. He met up with the Bonner brothers. They built a little cabin and they prospected all summer, worked this one gold showing. But when they got their assays back in the fall, they weren't that great. So the Bonner brothers said, we're packing it in, and they went back to Saskatoon. Well, my grandfather, he stayed, and he was
Okay,
very.
I just stop you on for 1 second there for people that are listening. There is that what ended up happening back in the past time. There is that people actually had to go and do physical labor and move
Yeah, well, I
and
mean,
do work. Like I still have the axe that you gave me back when I was 16. My Estwing is still at camp, and I keep that sharp all the time.
well,
And
unfortunately, my est wing is up in a palm tree somewhere in Florida. I threw it up there to get some coconuts, and that's where my est wing ended up, was up in the fronds of this coconut tree. And I hope somebody wasn't standing there when it came down in a big wind or something. I never heard about anybody getting killed by an axe, but go
no,
ahead.
getting back to your story though, is that people actually had, if you wanted to go and do something, you
Oh,
had
yeah.
to actually do physical labor to get to do something.
And it blew me away a lot of times when we'd stake certain properties that the old timers had long before
Hmm.
we got there. The trenches that
Yeah,
they dug by hand and the banks of
yeah,
rock they threw up on the sides. Some of these
right,
trenches
right,
went
right.
hundreds of feet, and I'm like, man, that must have been backbreaking. When my generation came along, we had backhoes and high hoes and loaders and all sorts of trucks and all sorts of big heavy equipment, but
Hmm.
those old timers, they did everything by hand and shovel,
Yeah.
pick, shovel, and but
Well,
anyways, go ahead.
I've been seeing even videos there too with gold miners back 100 years ago. Yeah, just digging through with these iron picks and digging through solid rock,
Yeah,
and that's before. Well, they had dynamite that was doing a little bit of help for them, but doing with that, and like
well,
you're going,
come on,
oh
everything was physical labor back in those days, and then things advanced.
yeah,
GPSs came in. We got the use of helicopters. They perfected bush plane flying, and so things would change. Now look what's going on in Ontario here with the government. All you don't go in
yeah.
the bush anymore and cut claim posts and blaze between your claim posts
Okay,
and come
okay.
back
Tell
out.
tell 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 people what a claim post is, because I did and cut hundreds of those. They're like a four
I
foot
cut thousands
squared.
thousands of them.
Yeah,
What happens is when you want to stake a claim, when you find a gold showing or find a zinc showing or some mineral, you got to go and cut a tree, and you cut it off at about 4.5, 5 feet high, and you got
yeah.
to trim it on each side. And the regulations
Four
require
inches minimum.
each side be 4 inches, and you got to have
Yeah,
your one side facing south towards your number two post, and then your your number one post is on the south facing side towards your two, sorry, and then the
yeah.
two, three, and four. So then you cut a line at a quarter of a mile through the bush, cut another tree down, and well, I mean, you can cut the tree right off. Sometimes we had to cut trees 100 feet away and bring them over to where the corner was. And then you put your
Mm-hmm.
writing on there, your name, your license number, the township,
Yeah.
and then you put your metal tag on there. When I first started out, you weren't allowed to tag your claims. You had to go record them, and then they would give you the tags. And then later on, you would you would go back and tag the claim. When I was in my young teens, like 13, 14, my dad used to hire me to go and tag claims that somebody else had staked. And half the time, you couldn't find the lines, you couldn't find the posts. So then we had to recreate and
But you also had to blaze the line there too to make
yeah,
a sight line.
you had to
Yeah,
blaze the line.
I
Each
still
side of
even
the
remember
trees.
my claim number anyway, E32543321.
Yeah.
So
K19,
because
mine's
you had to
K1904.
remember.
But there is no such thing as licenses well, yeah, there's a license, but it's all electronic. All the staking now is done on a computer where you put in the coordinate. Ontario, Quebec, and BC took all the land in the province and divided it all up into cells. So now what you stake is you don't stake claims anymore, you stake cells, which are
Yeah,
basically claims. But the whole province is divided into claims. You go on the computer, you bring up the map, you put in the number of the cell, and you send that into the computer to wherever it goes, and then you pay your $50 and you own that claim. You don't have to go out in the bush anymore. So guys like me, we're a dying breed. We're pretty well done.
yeah. That was the thing. This is like because that's where you met all the interesting people.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, a lot of times when claims were coming open, you'd have these huge claim rushes. Like I think one of the ones you were in with me was the one where there was 5 helicopters all in the same swamp,
Yep,
and
yep,
we were all competing for the same ground. And I had one of those big Bell 224s, and
yep.
Carl Forbes had a
Super Hueys. He had
yeah,
Super
that's right.
Hueys because I remember that's when I cut off the end of my thumb, and me and Audrey are in the helicopter, and the Super Hueys. We were like in front, and they just passed us right by.
Well, didn't see that.
Oh,
Say
oh,
this, my wife was just asking me if we saw the information from Dave Petrella, something about
oh
having.
yeah, oh yeah. Have you been up to Hudson Bay, Jim? I hear there's serious magnetic anomaly around the entire bay. I put that up there earlier, so.
Well, I worked out of Moosonee when we staked the Columbium deposit up there. My dad and Wally Boyko, they took the idea to consolidate in Morrison. We had to go on the train to Moosonee and then in a small chopper down into the James Bay lowlands, which is all part of the Hudson Bay lowlands as well.
Mhm.
And for 2 weeks, the whole area behind the riverbanks were, you could get up on a riverbank, but you couldn't land the helicopter there because it was all treed. So we had to
Yeah.
camp in the swamp, and all day for 2 weeks we were walking anywhere between water in our knees, in water up to our chests, putting in pickets and staking claims, and there wasn't very many trees. So I mean that
Well,
was
well,
probably the worst job I ever did in my life. So yeah, I've been
well.
up and
Even with Knife Lake, there we had to cut a helicopter pad just to go and put that stuff in there. And Mokumum up in northern Saskatchewan, like people don't understand is that this is just working in the bush. You do what you do.
well, what I always got a kick out of working you know, I've been in a number of fist fights over the years, especially up in Flin Flon there in the bars and whatever down in Timmins. Timmins was quite a different fighting atmosphere than Flin Flon. Flin Flon, when I was a kid, was when I played junior hockey there, it was all fist fighting. When I got to Timmins, it was all
Oh,
it was all kickboxing, kick fighting. But I've
ooh,
had guys come out to work with us in the bush, and these guys think that maybe in the gym or in the bar that they're tough guys, but I've lost them in the bush walking through the. I'm not saying I'm a super tough guy, but I've
hey,
lost some of these big tough
I
guys. Go ahead.
this is a part that goes into tough guys because I thought about this the other day. Hockey players that came from Flin Flon. Bobby Clark
Yeah, know him well.
played for the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah,
I think he had 1,220 penalty minutes.
he was a nasty,
Uh,
nasty character, but he was tough. He led the Flyers to 2 cups.
yep. Eric
He had diabetes
Nestor.
to boot.
Oh,
Born and raised
Eric
in Flin.
Nestorenko. Yeah,
Well,
Eric
Eric,
Nestorenko.
yeah, he,
Yeah, 574 penalty minutes. Dean Evison, 372 penalty minutes. Gary Hart, 174 penalty minutes. And then it goes on to a whole bunch of different other people that actually were from Flin Flon that played. I didn't put all their penalty minutes. Ken Baumgardner,
yeah, Kenny
uh,
Baumgart. He worked for my dad.
Al Al Hamilton,
Yeah, I knew him.
Dunk
I knew
McCa-
Al well. All the
Al
Hamilton.
McCallum,
Who?
Reed Dunk McCallum,
Yeah,
Reed Simpson,
good scrapper. Yeah,
George Connick,
George played for
Kim
the
D.
Memorial Cup team, the Bombers. Yeah,
Okay, Kim Davis,
yeah. Kim Davis. I think he was captain of the Bombers one year.
Matt Davidson,
Yeah.
Mel Pearson,
Boom Boom Pearson.
uh,
He had a hell of a slap shot. He was married to a girl that I went to school with, Ruby Reed. I think.
Ray Mutala,
Yeah,
Ken
Maluda.
Ken
Ray Maluda.
Muluda, yeah, sorry, Muluda, Ken Bard,
Yeah,
Ernie Walkley,
Ernie Wakely.
and
He was the
David
goalie. He was,
Weekly, and David Struck.
I don't know David. I don't know David, but the, my buddy was Reggie Leach when he played in the
Oh
NHL.
yeah,
Leach was the best player that I ever knew. Like I knew a lot of
I
guys
remember Reggie Leach. Yeah.
and he played in the NHL. He for getting tickets for the games. As long as I could get a message to Reggie, the tickets were there, even in Atlanta at the ticket booth, and no charge. And of course, Jerry Hart, he went out with my youngest sister. He was a defenseman on that famous team where they set all the records. Leach, Gene Carr, and Bobby Clark, and Jerry was the anchor on the defense. Those guys were all about 5, 6 years behind me. I played there in 1961, and the guy that was went to the NHL from our A team, I was on the B team with Al Hamilton. Al looked like another Bobby Orr. Was Tracy Pratt, and Tracy went on. I think he played for 7 or 8, maybe 9 teams in the NHL. And we used to party every Saturday night. And finally, some of the Bombers, the people that ran the team, came to me and they said, "Hey, do you think you guys could let up on the parties at your parents' house on Saturday night? Because we win on Saturday, you party, and then we lose on Sunday. Because the teams that came to football, they always had to play Saturday night and Sunday afternoon. So yeah, I know all those guys, and Kenny Baumgardner, his dad was a geologist with Hudson Bay Mining and Smelting, good friends with my dad. My dad used to have him and his brother slinging core around in the summertime.
You
And
see how this is all connected? This
yeah, yeah,
is like
you got it, man. Yeah,
right?
well,
It's just like live hard, be hard, party hard, and work hard, and think hard. Maybe
yeah,
that's the
there you
maybe
go.
there's four things there. Maybe I need another finger, or that's the thumb. Anyways, but
Well, that was the diamond driller credo: work hard and party hard. Those diamond
yeah,
drillers, oh man, they were. I mean, when you're working in grease and diesel oil all day, you got to be tough to stand that. I don't know. You remember the year at Knife Lake there where they burned that drill to the ground?
yep.
They set something about a propane tanker or whatever. I don't know what happened, but
And no, they fell asleep. That's not.
the
They
rest
had
is
too
history.
much coffee.
And you know, we had a pilot at Knife Lake there, Mokumen Lake. Of course, Mokumen is the Cree word for knife. We have a Mokumen just outside of Thunder Bay here, but we had
Yes.
what the hell was the kid's name that flew choppers for us? He was the captain of the bombers. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't remember. I got old timers and I can't think of his name right offhand. But I'll never forget the day that he came, dropped a couple of the native guys off, and they didn't shut the door properly. And when he went to go back up in the air, the door flew open, and you know that was dangerous about the tail rotor. And he put the machine back down, and he went and he kicked the door open and he went in there and he chewed on those guys for about 20 minutes. I didn't even go in because he was so mad. And they they put his life in danger by not shutting the door properly when they got out of the machine. And he
Well,
was
this
captain of the
goes in,
bomb. You never mentioned his
this
name. I wish
this
I could
goes
name.
into a good. This goes into another story, one that you told. I'm not sure if it's called the Sevenses or the Elevenses.
The 11s, yeah. That was
Yes,
11th
and
day of November that the plane crashed. It had 11 on the number of the fuselage. Uh, Everything that happened that day that had something to do with the number 11. There was
like a
11 miles
fuel
from.
tanks.
I've got the story written out, but I can't remember. That's a long time ago. That's back in '98. And yeah, the otter crashed right outside of Sandy Bay there. Sandy, uh, what's the name of the up on the Churchill River? But yeah, the 11s is that was an interesting. Was just a
That
coincidence, obviously, but
like everything, like the even like on the plane there was 11. There was like 11 fuel tanks. There was like 11 trees hit. There was like 11. Everything was 11 on that day.
yeah, yeah, that was what that was just blew me away. The 11s is and uh, can't remember all of them, but maybe if we're on again sometime, I'll dig out my story. In fact, I saw it today in one of my boxes. I got tons of boxes around here with 100 stories in each one. What about the time you cut the end of your thumb off there down at Weirdwater?
Well,
Remember
that showed up in the Northern Miner, and it was like guy cuts off thumb. It says no, I just cut off the end of my thumb.
yeah. Well, you jumping over a tree. You jumped over a tree, as I remember. That was a
Well,
good.
what? Okay, so we talked shortly about this earlier, but the thing was funny about it was is that during that time is that's when it was races to the mining recording offices
Yeah,
and people were setting up traps in the bush and anybody else that was coming in because I think the different mining companies were like, hey, they had guys in the bush who were shooting shotguns at helicopters and planes that were coming in. There was just crazy, and we came in, me and you, and we did a jump out of a helicopter into a swamp
great.
to walk to walk in a quarter mile to go to do a claim above what the heavies were doing.
Yeah, that was called the Jacobus property. It was a nickel copper property. I don't know. Sage had it for years, and Kodiak had it. Other companies have drilled it, but they've never been able to make it into an economic ore body. But maybe someday. Maybe there's another one deeper down, like they're drilling a property north of Weirdmore right now, up
Mm-hmm.
at Marshall Lake, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
property where one of the big mining companies drilled, and they got a couple million tons of modest ore, grade ore, and now they're back in there again, doing more drilling on a deeper target. Nowadays they
Mm-hmm.
can go down so deep with the geophysics. So when you have a base metal property, a lot of times there isn't just one sulfide body; there might be a dozen in, but you got to go deeper to find them. So
Right. Yeah.
Copper Lake's drilling up there right now at Marshall Lake, and we're all keeping us shareholders are keeping our fingers crossed.
And then I remember one there. If Audrey's in the background, if you know what, Audrey was the best cook there, period, besides myself, because I was awesome, anyways. But
Well, she used
because
to cook groundhog stew and partridge stew, and but
but I remember one time there we did a there was me, Brent, and I think maybe Jason Storkson, or I don't think it was Ray Linky. I think it was Jason Storkson, and then you brought up two guys from Toronto area to come up there, and you said these are going to be the lead hands to go and do this claims over here in Jellicoe. These are the guys, and we went into the bush and the two guys from Southern Ontario, the black flies, chased them out of the bush. And, and me, Brendan, and I can't remember. I think we may would have been Jason Storks, and I don't know. We just stayed there and we just kept on staking claims. And the two guys from Southern Ontario, we're not set up here for this. What? Fuck. They just left. They
Well,
got back in their car and left.
yeah, well, there's a song called "The Black Flies of Ontario," and I'll tell you, those black flies when they want, they can really be nasty. And you got the bulldogs and the mosquitoes and the no-see-ums, and those black
Yeah.
flies. They chased me out of the bush once at Hemlo, way up on a high outcrop, way up in the sort of mountainous area north of the Hemlo mine, and I was wearing glasses at the time, and they got in my eyes here, and every time I'd push my fingers up into my eyes to kill them, the blood would just run down my face. And
Mhm.
finally, I said, I got to get out of here. This is too nasty. But normally they get like in the back of your hair here and chew
Oh,
you
the
all.
worst is the back of the ears, eh? That's
Yeah,
that's the part. I
yeah.
but you had a picture there, and I lost this picture when I moved from Toronto back up to Thunder Bay,
Oh yeah.
and you had a picture that you took because you always used to go out and carry a camera in the bush
Always,
and
always.
take pictures.
Yeah.
And you have a picture. There's a picture of me, and there's Brent over on the side, and the black flies just came in and swarming. And I'm eating a peanut butter sandwich inside my shirt. And then all of a sudden, all these dragonflies came in and just started taking away all the black flies. And you snapped about 3 or 4 pictures, and you sent me 2 pictures of that. And they were just picking them off my face, off my head. And it was just so spectacular. And I just remember that. It's like, oh, I got a little bit of relief uh, in a day of misery where you're getting just bing, 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 black flies just nailing you all over the place.
Well, there's well-known famous stories about the prospectors way back in the 1800s when they used pack horses to haul around in northern British Columbia and the Yukon, and they would see these black flies coming, and they would be like a cloud, a black
Yeah,
cloud
and
of
late.
black flies, and they would have to
Mm-hmm.
put the horses down on the ground with I don't know if they took the packs off first or what they did. I don't
Well,
remember,
they
but
lay them under a blanket. Yeah.
and they would cover them with tarps or blankets or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise, if the black flies swarmed the horses, they'd get in their noses and ears and everything, and the horses would just go berserk and run off. So yeah,
Yeah.
well, the worst one I ever saw was Johnny Tomac. He was on. We were high pressure washing.
Macto.
McTow.
Macto.
Johnny, we called him, and he was on the Wajax there, high pressure washing. And my God, you couldn't let the hose go, the nozzle of the hose, because there was so much pressure, it would start flapping around like crazy. And if it ever
Yeah.
hit you in the head, it would kill you. I mean, that we
Yeah.
used metal ends on metal or plastic ends, whatever that job required. And I'd gone off mapping the geology. That was at Churchill Township down at Shining Tree. And when I came back, John was standing there, and the black fly or the bulldogs were all over his face, chewing him up. Tears were running down his eyes, but he couldn't let go of that hose, and there was nobody there like to relieve him, to help him. Like, okay, I'll hold the hose for a while. You kill all your bulldogs, man. That was a bad day when he was crying from the bulldogs, tears running
Yeah.
down
And
his face.
then now you look at these kids there today when they're looking at their phone. A guy can't let go of a hose because it might kill him and
Well,
kill his
yeah, they
friends
wouldn't live
around
very
him.
kids nowadays wouldn't live very long if they decided to one hand it with the hose and look at their phone or something. That hose would go flying. It's a different world today.
Yeah, that is so true. And you know what? We're coming up to our time there, Big Jim. You know what? And I really appreciate you spending the time and talking with me. And you know what? There is so many more stories. I know we have hundreds of more stories to go through, and I hope everybody that was listening along there that enjoyed all this stuff because you know what? This is life.
Well,
And
my first
tell them
book
where.
My first book was about the Narachme gold mine story. My grandfather found the gold mine at Snow Lake. Second one was called Head Frames, Happiness, and Heartaches. Mark Jackson and I wrote them together. And now my next book is going to be a memoirs book, Tales from the Bush and Beyond. And beyond is going to be Bay Street and Howe Street, and
Oh.
the people that run those establishments down there. You have to go down and beg for money from them, and they're the ones that do the financings and get in on the initial seed stock.
Mm.
And then the people up north, they get to buy the stock when the price gets elevated up. It's interesting life.
Oh, I remember a story about the Bay Street stiff with the guy there that took the beer bottle up the butt. And
Oh,
I remember that one. I've told that story about 100 times. There says,
the Coors
hey,
Light
as
bottle.
soon
It was the
as
Coors Light bottle, beer
Coors
bottle.
Light bottle says, hey, if I get this claim, $1 million. Boom.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, the
It,
story we can't tell on the in the public
oh
realm.
well, that'll be on the extra bonus content there, people. Anyways, but I I I thank you everybody for listening. This has been the delicious recipe, and this has been Big Jim Paris, my former boss, author,
Nice to meet you
prospector.
all. Nice to hear. I'm glad you're thrilled by all my stories. I'm the man of 1,000 stories. But maybe Dell will have me on again sometime.
I'll have you on, no problem for sure. This is great because there's so many other ones I wanted to get into, but this is only just for an hour anyway. So thank you very much. UPRN, New Orleans, 107.7.
Hey, Dell, I wrote a story. New Orleans got the blues.